Of announcements, we have some upcoming events. The first one is the Fort Worth Police Memorial, and that is Wednesday, May 3rd at 6 p.m. We also have the Fort Worth Police Department and a promotional ceremony, and that will take place at the Bob Boland Public Safety Complex, Friday, May 5th at 10 a.m. Now I'm going to call on Councilmember Williams, and I think he has an announcement for us as well.
Thank you for that. I just wanted to take a quick moment to invite all of our Fort Worth District 6 residents and all of our residents across the city to join the Auber and Anderson family in remembering the lives of Ben and Meg Auber as we dedicate a memorial park bench and a memorial street topper in their honor. The dedication ceremony will be tomorrow, May 3rd at 6 p.m. at Summer Creek Ranch Park. There's more details on our social media at Jared Williams TX. Thank you.
Thank you. And next, I'm going to call on Christina Brooks to announce an upcoming event. Christina.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council, City Manager, and all the assistant city managers and the community. As you know, May is Asian American Pacific Islander and Asian American Heritage Month. And in light of that celebration, I want to give you a quick overview of the history of the celebration. So it's a celebration of Asians and Pacific Islanders in the United States. Although it's a rather broad term, Asian Pacific encompasses all of the Asian continent and the Pacific islands of Melanesia, which includes New Guinea, New Caledonia, Vanuatu, Fiji, and the Solomon Islands. It also includes Micronesia, which includes the Marianas, Guam, Wake Island, Palau, Marshall Islands, Kiribati, Nauru, and the Federated States of Micronesia. It also includes Polynesia, which consists of New Zealand, the Hawaiian Islands, Rotuma, Midway Islands, Samoa, American Samoa, Tonga, Tuvalu, Cook Islands, French Polynesia, and Easter Island. Like most commemorative months, Asian and Pacific American Heritage Month originated with Congress in the 1970s and began as a week-long designation until 1992, when Congress passed a new law designating the entire month of May as Asian American Pacific American Heritage Month. The month of May was chosen to commemorate the immigration of the first Japanese to the United States, May 7th, 1843, and to mark the anniversary of the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad on May 10, 1869. The majority of the workers who laid the tracks were Chinese immigrants. To celebrate, the Diversity and Inclusion Employee Committee hosted an employee social and program. The topic and event took place Tuesday, April 25th from 9 to 10:30 a.m. And it was just outside of council chambers here, where employees enjoyed Japanese tea and cookies and learned about the upcoming May 11th Asian American Pacific Islander program. This year's program, hosted by the Staff Diversity and Inclusion Committee, is called the Asian Tradition of Meditation and Mindfulness. It will be held Thursday, May 11th from noon to 1 in Council Chamber on the second floor at City Hall. The program will feature a presentation by Dr. Mark Dennis, a Texas Christian University professor and director of Contemplative Studies, or CALM, Compassionate Awareness and Living Mindfully Initiative, who will talk about the history, doctrines, and schools of Buddhism, which continue to inform and influence modern practices in meditation, mindfulness, yoga, and Tai Chi. There will also be guided exercises in mindfulness, grounding, and gratitude. Registration is not required for city staff, but it's highly encouraged. Lunch will be provided for the first 75 employees who register. If you can't make it to City Hall, you can watch remotely on Fort Worth TV and the city's YouTube channel in Fort Worth City Hall. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. I think
Thank you.
that's the first time our council chamber has been used synonymously with mindfulness and meditation. But we'll hope they rub off on everybody while they're there. Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
All right. Now we'll turn to informal reports. The first one is a downtown library update, and Marilyn Marvin is available if there are any questions.
I think Marilyn maybe come up just to walk through things. Yeah.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Marilyn Marvin, Interim Library Director. We are scheduling the last day of service for the Central Library to be June 30th. That allows us time to clear out the Central Library on the timeline that has been proposed in the contract, the sale of the library. We have about 100,000 pieces of material, books, and items that have to be dispersed throughout the system. We're also donating to a local 501c3 to get into the hands of teachers. It gives us time to get all the furniture out and get our employees to the appropriate locations that they're going. Some of the staff's going to a leased space on Camp Bowie West. Some of the staff will go to the future City Hall. And we are still actively working with property management to figure out where a new downtown location will be.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Go ahead.
Hey, thanks. So I'm going to be honest, I'm a little concerned by the progress that we have not made in finding a new location. So you've given us a final date for when our downtown library is no longer going to be open.
Yes,
and
ma'am.
I think it's fair to say that it's not just downtown that uses it, but, you know, there's not a library location in the West 7th area, and so it has a pool. When we made the determination to sell that property and not have a location in the bank, we did so on faith that there would be one so that our residents would not be out of service, but it's looking like our residents are going to be out of service in downtown. And so what are we doing here to make sure that we're addressing that? And another thing that seems problematic to me in this as well is the fact that it says the new location will determine the programs and services offered, when it really should be the other way around. Our location should be chose to accommodate the services and programs that our residents want, the same way we do with community centers. And so I need you to lay out exactly where we are and where we're going to make sure that this gap of non-service is as short as possible.
I'm going to let Steve help me with
Thank you, Steve.
the property search itself. From a programming perspective, you're absolutely correct. We look at what our communities need, and then based on that community need, helps drive the programming that we present. So every library location in the city doesn't provide the same programming because each community is different. And so that is worded a little incorrectly. It's not about the size of the library on how we'll do programming, because as our RISE library shows us, we can provide services in 800 square feet, exact same services that we provide in Central today. And so the size is not what determines the programming, it is our community.
I just wanted to share that as a department working with library, we have shown them and looked at multiple areas around downtown and within downtown. We've made offers that weren't accepted. We made full price offers that weren't accepted. We've looked at everything we could think to look at. We've looked at 12,000 square feet and 200 square feet.
Yep.
We've looked at leasing. We've had a couple of leases that has fallen through. We have one more that we're working on diligently to try to get that one going. We won't stop doing that work, but we have not found anything that's available to us right this second. We have to have a willing buyer and a willing seller, and we haven't come to that conclusion yet with somebody, but we have certainly been working on it. So, and we'll continue to do that work.
So are you looking, when you're looking for property, are you looking specifically in downtown only? Like, what are the boundaries that you're looking at?
Well, we're trying to find something that pretty much will fit anything that fits within some kind of budget. Obviously, we can't just do anything we want to, and we're limiting it to size to some extent as well. But we have stretched out as far as we think we can in the downtown. We've even gone beyond that a little bit. And for the most part, we haven't found anything on those exterior ones that would really work without spending too much money to make sense for what we're trying to do. So we're going to continue down the easement, the lease path as much as we possibly can, just like we've done with the Camp Bowie space. We want to do something like that, and we want to be as close to downtown as we can be. So we have not been successful, but that is not something we're going to quit trying to do.
Is it a possibility as we move into, and let me be clear, would like to see a solution before this particular date, but there's all of the properties that will be vacating as we start to move into new City Hall. Have any of those been identified as potentials?
We have absolutely thought about this building because of some of the things that, we want to do with the remodel of this building, obviously, when we move out, or most of us move out. And so that's part of that. We've been thinking about that for a very long time. And so that remains an option. And just about anything else that we can think of. We've literally looked at 200 square foot space in a train depot. We've looked at 12,000 square foot places to buy. And just like I said, we haven't come across the deal yet that we can nail down.
Thank you.
Any other questions, council? Thank you both.
The next informal report are on efforts to reduce high-speed traffic, reckless driving, street racing, and other hazardous behavior.
I would
And
like,
yes, and come on up, Assistant Chief.
while the chief is coming, I want to
Aldridge.
acknowledge some citizens who've been very helpful in bringing this committee into its purpose right now, that being Torchy White, Cindy Bowling, Judy Taylor, and a few other people, along with our East Side Commander, took the lead. So would like to acknowledge them and hear what we have for the latest.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Glad to be here. This is a very, very, very difficult topic to talk about. A, because people have lost their lives, and B, it is really hard to address. And as you can tell by the IR that's kind of outlined, we broke it up into two different areas. I could have broken it up into 5, 6, 7 different areas, and I could be standing up here talking all day about it if you'd like. But for us, whenever you're talking about speeding and reckless driving, that's really what it is. It's people speeding down the street, having opportunities, they're late for work, whatever the case may be. Speeding and reckless driving don't always correlate into racing, street takeover events. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But just so you guys know, we handle it a couple of different ways. We get calls from the citizens, we get calls from school administrators for school zones, we get calls from just about everybody for speeding or reckless driving complaints. Our MPOs are out there, our traffic enforcement unit is out there, we have our commercial motor vehicle enforcement unit out there because we get a lot of complaints about the 18-wheelers rolling down the street. So just a number to throw out there, in the last 6 months, traffic enforcement's issued almost 13,000 citations. So out of the 13,000 citations, they've done over 1,700 stops just in school zones. Well, as you guys know, we have a lot of schools in the area. And so they can't be at every school zone every day, but they're trying to hit every one of them that they can. Another thing they do is they use our crash data, some of the accidents that we have, that information that we have, and they go in groups. And you may see them, if you ever have the Waze app, you'll know where our traffic unit is because they're very much highlighted on that Waze app of where they're at. Because citizens report the police in the area. And really what they do is they try and stay, in those high trafficked areas where we have reckless driving or high speeds to try and calm that behavior down. So whenever you kind of transition though over into racing and street takeover events, something totally different. That one is just, that sometimes can be spur of the moment, that sometimes can be definitely well orchestrated, but some of the challenges we've talked about before is on social media, they go underground. And so we usually only get about 15, 20 minutes notice before they kind of pop up. Sometimes we don't even get any notice except whenever citizens start calling in saying, hey, this event has happened. So for us, we use our directed response unit, and those are our primary unit because they're out during those times whenever we have those events taking place, and they're able to address them quite easily. Now, we have partnered with Dallas. They have a task force for racing, and we have a really good network of intel that kind of flows back and forth. And they help us out tremendously on kind of highlighting if certain events are supposed to come into town. But what happens is Sometimes they come into town, sometimes they don't. The event that happened in Austin, they actually were supposed to be in Fort Worth that weekend. So don't know why they diverted to Austin, but they did. One of the greatest resources we have, in all honesty, is that spectator ordinance. We've been able to make quite a few, arrests on that, and it has a significant impact on those individuals because not only can we arrest them, but if they're in a vehicle, we will tow their cars, make it inconvenient for them because they're creating a hazard for the public out there. So, we're hoping with this legislative session that there's going to be some other laws that gives us a little more teeth to help out with some of this. But, I will tell you, the officers out there are doing a phenomenal job. And in the IR itself, you guys have seen stats for the number or the citations across the city. We listed the fatality accidents, kind of where they're at, kind of the causes of those, just for your information.
Questions, council? Jared?
Yeah, thank you, Chief. First of all, similar to Mayor Pro Tem, I just want to thank you and Commander Smith and our MPOs like Officer Carriger and Officer Hayes. I know they work a lot with our residents like Pastor Brown and some of our neighborhood presidents on major arterials and high-speed racing. I appreciate the differentiation between high-speed traffic, reckless driving and speed racing. Because I know you all take different approaches to address those issues. I just have a few questions in a spirit of partnership. The first one is, it's my understanding through the informal report that the traffic enforcement section enforces traffic laws. Is that centrally located or is that in each division?
So we have two different enforcement units. One is the motors, where you see them out riding on the motorcycle. Others, we have cars. A lot of the cars stay kind of on the highways and the main thoroughfares, but the motors will pretty much go everywhere. And they are, different teams are assigned to different sides of town. But that doesn't mean they don't get pulled into other areas whenever we need them there. So they try and stay within their geographical areas, but sometimes they get pulled away.
That makes sense. And then I know we had a meeting with Commander Smith and Pastor Brown and specifically about major arterials in District 6 that have caused some concern: Columbus Trail, Risinger, McCart, Summer Creek, Granbury Road, and Hewlin. And I know in that conversation that we had conversations about potential challenges with staffing in that division. Can you kind of highlight what challenges you are facing in the traffic enforcement section?
So because we have a few vacancies in patrol, patrol is our highest priority. We want to make sure that we have call answering bodies out there so when people call 911, we show up. With that, we have to hold some of those vacancies in some of our specialized units in order to make sure, patrol is fully staffed. As we continue to get more personnel within our department, we're going to start filling those positions up as time goes on.
Absolutely, and I would love personally for District 6 to see us have more traffic enforcement. I know that's a function of staffing, and so in this budget cycle, I would really like to see us make a concerted effort to provide the resources needed in traffic enforcement.
Yes.
I know in District 6, the perception, although not always reality, is that if a police car is patrolling or seen patrolling, that it's empty, and so folks will blow past the car, blowing past the speed limit as well, and it creates a lot of angst and also a lot of accidents and also, unfortunately, a lot of tragic losses of life. So I want to be a partner in that in the next budget cycle to do that. The other thing I wanted to do is bring up maybe TBW just to ask for their insights on some of the traffic calming measures. I know we use a lot of temporary kind of solutions on an as-needed basis. I would love to maybe have a discussion and maybe we can talk more.
Before the chief leaves, I
Oh,
still
please,
have a
please.
question.
Stay there.
for police.
So first of all, I'm super grateful for TPW. Y'all have worked with our office in District 6 on a number of improvements, multiple stop signs on Risinger, traffic signals, school zones, pedestrian safety related issues. So super grateful for that. I know that y'all work hard to make sure that our roads are safe and have the proper infrastructure in place. What are some of the permanent?
Jared, I'm trying to ask.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
You want to go ahead? Okay, let me
want to stick with the
pause. Stay
topic
there.
that we have at hand.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
And I think after Gina, Carlos has something for Chief, and then we'll come back to the people.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
You
go ahead.
just can't take over the whole show.
No. I just wanted to get mine out and get out the way.
I want to remind you, when Commander Martin first took over, what we saw was a big stop, if you will, a pause, because they had planned on coming to Fort Worth from Dallas. her father, a retired cop, was able to call and tell her, well, looks like your neighbors are going back. That's because you guys had a grand showing, if you will, at the overpasses, what have you.
Yeah.
You can't do that all the time because you can't be everywhere all the time.
Right.
But can you talk about the importance of everybody participating in this, and how frustrating is it for your officers to get a call about shots fired, but nobody knows where they were, and it's not like they're just waiting for the cops to come?
So, we have some really good partnerships, not only, internally, but with DPS. I mean, TPW has been a phenomenal partner, with the kind of the street takeover deal. We learned that one of the quickest measures to try and hamper some of those issues are just those small little delineators in the road. It tears up the cars whenever they're trying to do donuts, which I thought was very, very interesting because it's a very cheap fix. We were trying to think really grandiose and, hey, oh my gosh, we got to do all these things, and really it wasn't that. Commander Martin has done a really good job. She has a sergeant over there, Sergeant Walker. Sergeant Walker, he went to Dallas, saw how their task force kind of did things, brought some of those concepts back, because our DRU personnel can't always be everywhere at one time, whereas he helped train some of the people in East Division, because I know you were having an issue at John T. White as well. And so, presence is a really big thing, but also the enforcement piece is an even greater thing, because whenever you start enforcing these, really the spectator ordinance, that's pretty much what they arrest them for. If they can get them for reckless driving, they will. But whenever you put them in jail, they don't want to come here. It's an inconvenience. It costs them money. And so the word gets out really, really quickly whenever we have a large presence of individuals that are coming down on them.
I appreciate that. I didn't want to gloss over this because this is a very important topic to many people in their homes.
Thanks, Gina. Carlos, any questions for Chief?
Well, both Chief and I guess since Chelsea, is up there and will probably talk about this, at least I hope you would mention this. Since 2017, I've been asking TPW to look at speed tables. And it's only been recently that has been, I think, now looked at to the point of implementation. Speed tables, again, not speed bumps, not to be confused with, on average, they reduce speeds, average speeds, 85, the 85 percentile speeds as well, reducing auto collisions and probably the severity of all auto collisions is, included. When are we going to start deploying those? I mean, do we have a plan of attack where the streets that we know that this is a problem, where we get frequent speeding, when will they be implemented?
So I'll answer the question on the speed tables. So speed tables are really appropriate for certain applications. And in TPW, we're really looking at residential streets. For high-speed corridors where folks are going 45, 50 miles an hour, potentially having speed tables will only create another safety issue at those locations. So we're focused through our neighborhood traffic calming program on implementation of speed cushions, speed tables. Residents have the option of looking at doing narrowing the residential streets using bulb outs essentially. So we have these rubberized engineered curbs that we're purchasing to do some of those things. And with those recommendations, it also requires community consensus. So lots of times, whether it be signs or cushions or tables, there's a parking impact in front of someone's property, and so we have to make sure there's buy-in for those things before we implement them.
Right, and the speed cushions being a lower profile, generally speaking, as opposed to speed tables. I've seen this implemented in other cities, like the city of Austin. There's one right in front of my sister's house down there. They love it. So, and I agree with you. I think that there is opportunity to do that in residential streets. That's where I get a lot of my consternation from District 2 residents. So, I'd like to work with you all to identify what streets they are, because if you're looking for community buy-in, I'll give you a list. And, we can proceed that way. Thank you.
Questions, Council? Gina, go ahead.
Yeah, one more question, Mayor. And I don't know if this involves the street sweepers. I still haven't seen one yet, just so y'all know. But every time there is, burning rubber, they've been there, they leave their mark with those black circles. That's not a good thing to be left behind. How do we address that? And is that something that street sweepers could be called in at the ready? or do we even think about it? In my neighborhood, the people get these things cleaned up, but I think that's part of our problem as well. We don't want the remnants of this bad behavior to remain.
Leonard?
Yeah, Chief, you mentioned we may look to Austin to put some teeth into giving you some greater abilities, I guess, to enforce any laws, regulations. So I'm just curious as to what they might be considering. And additionally, are they getting information from you as PD that would help in their consideration of whatever changes they might make?
So one of the pieces of legislation that I know that they're looking at is specifically street takeover events. And really, they're looking at the ability to, probably seize the vehicles and have higher penalties for events like that. To answer your second question, absolutely. They're asking our opinion, asking for our support for things like that, which they have.
Yeah, thank you.
Go ahead, Jared.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, you had mentioned an intersection when folks are doing donuts. What is that device called that's relative?
They're just those little, like, reflective delineators that you see on the street that divide the roadway. So if you go across it, you can tell with your car. They're literally just this tall.
Awesome.
And so,
thank you.
you just put glue on the bottom of them, stick it on the roadway.
Chelsea, I would be really interested in those devices. Also, what are our current practices for the digital or permanent digital radar speed signs in the city?
So at this time, we don't currently deploy permanent driver feedback signs. And part of the reason is that previously that was used as the strategy for traffic calming. Over time, it's not really effective. We've actually gotten requests for people to take out those driver feedback signs because people were using them to help with their speeding or racing on the roadways. So the way that they're deployed now is really over a 3-week period. We'll install it, let it run without the driver feedback sign on, collect data, and then on the 3rd week, the plan is to remove it, look at the data and see if there was any impact in the awareness of drivers of their speed based on those driver feedback signs.
And I'm assuming based on the data, y'all have seen short-term impact, but over time it kind of dwindles.
Yes.
Okay, perfect, thank you. I know a number of residents asked that question, so I thought it's important to answer that. Do y'all have any plans, I guess, pilot the delimiters in certain intersections? If so.
So I know in Eastside, we've put some down, and it's been very effective for us. But to answer for the speed trailer, we have speed trailers as well. We did put them out on West Risinger not that long ago, and it does exactly the same thing. It monitors the speed of the people driving down the road. We've learned that if we move them around, they are a lot more effective than just having them in place.
Perfect. Well, I would love to participate in the next pilot in District 6 with the delimiters, so I'd be happy to work with y'all on a couple of intersections.
Sounds good.
Thank you. Chief, when you talked about, well, maybe this might be more of a TPW question, but those reflectors, can you physically tell me like what that configuration looks like on the road that stops and like, is it a,
It's not a defined pattern. It's just having them in the intersection because it disrupts them doing donuts in that intersection.
and so, sorry, go
Yeah,
ahead.
go ahead.
So that stops the donuts, but it doesn't really help with the street racing, is
No,
that correct?
it does not, no.
Okay. And so then how much, roughly, to install these in an intersection to prevent the donuts, about how much does that cost per intersection?
I would actually have to do some research on that and get back to
Okay.
you. But I think we're talking about the raised pavement markers.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're probably one of the lowest cost
Okay.
items that we have.
And the reason I ask is because in last year's budget, we really doubled down on street striping and that maintenance and updating that schedule. And so to the extent that we can piggyback those. So as we're going out and restriping these streets, if it is that inexpensive to install these reflectors, if we can incorporate that into the design of their street striping, that would be, I think, probably really helpful for us. And because I know, like, for example, 8th Avenue in District 9 is one that we get constant complaints on, street striping and street racing. And so to the extent that we can restripe that street and then add those reflectors to combat both, to me, that seems to make the most sense. And so can we get a follow-up IR on what a program like that, or maybe it's best for a budget response, but some sort of information on what that combined program would look like?
Will do.
Thank you.
And maybe in the meantime, I think a lot of council members have interest in providing more feedback on what roadways, whether it's street racing problems or just speed. Just let them know how you want that reported, and we can do the same thing in our office, because we do get a lot of complaints about this through social media and also through email. So just tell them which email you want to fill up full of those. You look really happy about that, I know, I'm so sorry. But I just want to commend Chief Aldridge and the department for how hard you've been working. I know how much resource you're having to put towards this issue. Every single mayor I talk to in Texas right now is dealing with this, so we're thankful that DPS is taking it seriously, and TxDOT for that matter. So if anybody at this dais needs to help you, especially on the legislative side, Michael Crane obviously chairs that committee. I'm happy to do the same. The legislators I've talked to have said nothing but praise for our department and how they've been in Austin and helped lobby on these issues. But if you need anything else, just let us know.
And I appreciate that. And it's the officers on the street doing the job. It is not me. I can assure you of that. They're doing a really good job, and they're taking it just as seriously as I would.
Yeah, thank you, Chief. We appreciate you. Any other questions, council? Okay, we'll keep going.
Thank you. Thank you. Next informal report is also a police TPW partnership. Smart streetlights and gunshot detection as collaborative technologies. Deputy Chief Carbajal and Julius White with TPW. Come on up.
I'll state the question that I've gotten so that the chief can be aware. I've gotten a text message, and basically this is from news media saying that several large metropolitan areas are getting pushback, and Chicago is facing legal issues by groups trying to have this technology evidence be inadmissible to courts. And so as you tell us about it, please keep that issue in mind to let me know how we're looking in Fort Worth.
Well, I'll just say on the record, this may seem a little crass, but I do not think we want to be compared to Chicago when it comes to gun violence. So whatever this department is doing, we are really appreciative and appreciate you pointing that out, Gina. But I think our city attorney's office is well prepared to make sure these are defensible in court.
Nobody is like Chicago. I'll tell Fox 4 that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. This is an IR to update how we can implement gunshot technology with our smart streetlights if the city decides to consider that as an option. As we go forward, the current status right now is in order to implement gunshot detection, you need certain power sources as well as with cameras. The smart streetlights will provide that in a very efficient and effective way. So really the point is just to get us up here to say that yes, as this new technology comes onto play for both of us, that we are working together.
Yes, excuse me. To touch on what he was just speaking on, the infrastructure of street lighting and implementing gunshot triangulation would require significant investment to outfit each individual street light with what we call a smart node. Each node would report things such as tilt and vibration sensors, voltage, wire thefts, knockdowns. We would basically be able to determine when a fixture would be able to, when its end of life cycle would be coming up, so we could kind of predict where an outage will be reported. In that cycle with that node, there is a power tap that could be used to power the gunshot detection because it's just an acoustic microphone that's tuned to the frequency of a gunshot. And what that is that gunshot is then using PTZ cameras to triangulate where it come from.
What's PTD?
I'm sorry, my apologies, pan, tilt, and zoom.
Okay.
With pan, tilt, and zoom operations, what we would do with the smart street lighting is creating a spotlighting effect. If we had a smart street lighting system, the plan would be to run all street lights at a 70 to 75% threshold so we could extend the life cycle of each fixture, possibly 2 to 5 years. If a gunshot was detected, when the camera turns the tilt in the area where the gunshot comes from, the area where the lighting is in that vicinity would increase and the lighting on the outer perimeter would decrease. So in essence, you'd get a spotlighting effect along with the video image. So in essence, this triangulation of gunshots and smart street lighting, it can be implemented. It has not been implemented in Texas. There are a few cities doing both, but not, at the same time. I do know that cities like Dallas has implemented things like smart street lighting controls that they're actually testing and piloting. However, they have not integrated the gunshot detection aspect, but they're actually testing gunshots in a different part of town. but they have not actually did the integration for both.
Yeah, are you an officer as well, or are you from IT?
No, ma'am, I'm a senior CPO for transportation management.
Okay.
Yes,
What I would strongly suggest is that PD be sure to bring Roy Hudson in this conversation, because the basis of these questions being raised is it might drive up unpleasant encounters between people and police in these areas, which could often be high-crime areas, inner cities. And so I think it's important that Roy Hudson be involved in the conversation so that if we do this, the community is not caught off guard.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, and just to kind of comment on that, our whole focus with this technology is that we don't have those unpleasant encounters. We want to have that laser focus, so we'll definitely include everyone in the conversation. But the whole purpose of this technology is to have limited interaction, and those interactions that we do have are most effective in keeping everybody safe. As well, yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Crane?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, and I'll reiterate something I said in a private meeting. I'm in support of technology as we can figure out how to stop crime. I mean, this is about preventing crime overall, and we can catch it. And I'll say I hear from my neighborhood, so I'll reiterate. One of the things I did hear, we have a whole plan in Las Vegas Trail for revitalization, and I can't not get anything done there if people don't feel safe.
Sure.
And so I hear from the neighborhoods, I hear from other things, and I see that's one of the target areas from the high crime. So if we, and I'll be supportive of this technology, that we can use it there to test it to make sure it can work across the city, and I'll advocate for it in that way, because we have to continue to make our citizens feel safe. And if this is a way we can do it in a very objective way to find out what crime is happening, then we should be doing it in everything that we do. So I appreciate y'all researching this and putting this forward for us to consider. Thank
you for your support.
Councilmember Flores?
Yes, Chief Honorable Hall, you and I have talked about this when I made the original request for this IR. I'm going to focus on a couple of things. One, I support this approach. This grant money gives us the ability to go ahead and evaluate these two things. The IR reads of implementation of technology. Well, it's implementation, but there is no penalty cost to us because we're evaluating the tech, right?
Absolutely, it's
Yeah,
a great
between
thing.
Flock and ACOM, I guess that's how
Yes,
you
sir,
would pronounce it,
ACOM.
right? Yes, okay, well, good. When I first read it through, my initial impression was that it was tied into the NIPS, right, the Neighborhood Improvement Programs, but it isn't necessarily, right? You also looked at the previously provided information that we see with reported gunshots and the heat maps, et cetera, so I think that factors into it. I did have one question, and, it's one of those what's in a name considerations, right? You say the historic north side, west of the stockyards.
Yes, sir.
What are
As
you
I
talking
define,
about?
as I define the historic north sides west of the stockyards.
Yeah.
Really, 28th Street.
Okay.
Down to really North Side Drive and west over to Jacksboro. That's that defined area. But as you stated, many factors to consider before we implement this technology. As we get closer to implementation, we're going to do another study and a heat map to where we have the most violent crime in combination with population density and existing technology available to get the most bang for our taxpayer dollar.
Okay, and that's good. And I think you've had some, when I say you, the editorial you, PD, had conversations with our neighborhood services folks, especially those that are tasked with the, management of our neighborhood improvement programs. I ask that you please consider to do that. There's one that's, starting up, there in the greater North Side area, the historic Marine neighborhood.
Yes, sir.
As we discussed, I think I explained to you where those boundaries are. I would like to see a boundary map of what is referenced here as a historic north side west. So that I can have a better understanding, because even within the greater north side, there are areas that have their own namesake.
Absolutely,
So
yes,
just want to make sure that, we're clear, on the areas that we're going to get, support, a good, fact-based approach to, getting this technology out there so we can evaluate it in the areas that need it the most. So please, coordinate with Amy Connolly, there who, is heading up our neighborhood improvement plans, specific to the historic Marine, see if there's opportunity there, because money has not been allocated. So, that might be, an area of interest to you. But thank you, for this.
Great information. Thank you.
One thing I'd like to add, Carlos, you really do have to watch the dollars. With my neighborhood improvement money, I was able to keep it down to the penny because they will hide that money from you if you don't let them know you know how much is there. And
Thanks, Gina.
I'm serious. And the other thing, when it comes to light, when we started that neighborhood improvement strategy, street lights make the big difference in Stop 6 Michael. And so if yours is the first to start, I think you'll see a very swift change. But your Como community may not welcome them because they didn't welcome the cameras, whereas Stop 6, Northside, whichever part of the North Side, Ash Crescent, all did. But the key was giving people light to help them feel safe.
Correct, absolutely.
Elizabeth?
So I hear a lot of gunshots in my neighborhood, and I have the benefit of receiving y'all's emails, so I know if that gunshot was related to some sort of violent crime. And what I have sussed out was that a lot of times it's not. There just seems to be people like to shoot. And so what, from a PR communications standpoint, other than enforcement, are we doing to try to deter gunshots? Because I have personally come to the conclusion that we have just, as a community, decided it's real cool to go outside in the middle of the night and pop off rounds. And so what can we do in addition to this enforcement to curb that, or what are we doing?
Absolutely. From a public awareness standpoint, we have our MPOs going out. They go to places where we do have common areas, and we'll put up, especially, obviously, before the 4th of July, a big topic. We go out there and we put out literature saying, these are the rules about shooting guns. Don't do them. Also, part of our violent crime initiative, we've gone to areas as well and put out literature to educate people on that it's not appropriate to shoot guns.
Any other questions, Council? Sorry, Chris, Councilmember Nettle.
I appreciate that question, Councilwoman Beck. And I will like to challenge that. I think it needs to be a little bit more communication, because the literature that you're probably handing out or giving are to the people who are probably not shooting guns.
Sure.
So there probably needs to be a better approach, maybe posting on social media, sponsoring a post. And I was looking at the IR when Councilman Crane had mentioned Las Vegas Trail, and I started looking at the different communities, and what I'm seeing that a majority of these communities that we have listed are in areas, I guess, where we discover there's high crime, or in areas of low income. And so one of the questions I have is how do we discover these areas where there's a conversation with council members, or did you just use your crime radar to figure out where you want to pilot these programs?
Yes, sir. This is our preliminary study, and we're always open to more suggestions as well. But preliminarily, they looked at where's the most gun violence, and combination where's the most population density, where is the most technology existing to get the most bang for our buck, because the gunshot technology alone is not the silver bullet, for no pun intended. It's you have to have other technology in place in order to make that. You have to have other cameras in place, and it's technology that's really put in about a 1 mile area. So you want to be very particular about where you put that to where you do get the most for your technology.
Okay, and I understand that. And so in some of my senior living areas, there's maybe not necessarily gun violence, but it goes back to, I think Councilman Beck said, there's gun shooting. The people are just shooting guns in the air or whatever they may be doing. I was actually talking to a resident the other day about saying there's just a lot of shots going on. Was that a gunshot? So one of the questions I have is, once the gunshot detected, are you familiar with the program? Is it going to alert the sergeant, or what when it detects and the light gets brighter and the other lights get dim, what happens at that next step?
Well, that's a great approach, and I can speak to the gunshot specifically. The light is kind of conceptual because we're not there yet, but with the gunshot technology, what it's going to do is go to our real-time crime center, and then it's going to hit a human aspect. Then they're going to start zooming in on the cameras and seeing what they can see. And once they decide it's something worthy of dispatching an officer out there, then they'll put that call out there. So it's not just a shot going off, and we're going to send officers everywhere. That'll take up all our time. So it's going to put that human element in combination with technology to give us the smartest approach.
Okay, so you kind of have an idea of what's happening on scene before you go, which is a great idea.
That's the goal, yes, sir.
All right, thank you, Officer. Chief.
Questions, any more, Council? Thank you both very much.
Thank you. Deputy Chief, you might want to stay right there. The next one is use of flock camera search functions. And Deputy Chief Carbajal is available if there are any questions.
Carlos?
Yeah. Deputy Chief, if you just cover again what you and I had discussed. I just want everyone listening in to be clear on the capabilities that flock cameras have, the additional search functions that they do have, by subscription if you choose to buy them. If you could just cover that, please.
Absolutely. The flock camera itself has the ability to detect license plates in the area, and we can check those license plates reference to a database that tells us if someone has potentially committed a crime or has warrants for their arrest. Specifically, the IR references the advanced search feature. And what that does, it has 3 sections. You have the convoy analysis, and it'll tell you when vehicles are traveling together. So if I have a vehicle that I think is suspicious, I want to know who his friends are, I can see everywhere where it's hit. And if it has someone else with it, then I'll know, in fact, maybe that's someone I want to look at as well. The other one we have is a multi-geo search. So you can bounce a location where an offense has occurred. If you have a camera nearby, and just say you have a suspect or a gang house nearby, you can check both those locations to see if you get a commonality between those license plates. And the last is going to be the visual search. What that does, it allows things like Ring cameras or closed-circuit TV. You can get those images, push them into our system, and it'll search for that car in the system based on what you put in there.
All right, thank you, sir.
The Ring cameras, those are, is that part of the voluntary program where residents can enroll?
Yes, ma'am, they can voluntarily enroll, or just say an offense has occurred where they haven't voluntarily enrolled. The officer can say, hey, do you have any images? They can check it. If there's something of a car, we can get that image, stick it into our system, and it'll try and find similar things in the area bouncing off the cameras.
But they'd have to grant that permission first?
Absolutely, yes, ma'am.
Jared?
Yeah, I just want to follow up on that question as well. Can you explain for residents who may be watching what the registration process is and what it means? I think some residents think that it gives y'all direct access, but I don't think that's necessarily the case.
You know, I believe it's in a couple of different levels. You can grant us access, or you can just grant us access after the fact, or it can just let us know that it's actually there. So you can have it registered so we can know if there's a crime occurred, this is someone that we're going to want to talk to. So it's really where your comfort level's at.
Perfect, thank you. And that data is not publicly available if someone were to register their camera, right? Okay.
Anybody else? Thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you, Chief. Next up is the towing management contract, and Deputy Chief Barthen is available if there are any questions.
Questions from council?
All right. Next informal report is on the quantity of multifamily and detached multifamily unit development in current and future council districts, and Dana Bergdorf is available if there are any questions. All right. Next informal report is on options for posting start time on agendas, and Jeanette Goodall is available if there are any questions.
I don't have a question, but yes. I mean, I do have a question.
Go ahead.
I know, I am too. Thank you, Jeanette. If you could just give us a quick high level of the changes that we're proposing to make for the times.
So last year, and I don't remember exactly when, we went with posting, especially for the corporation boards and the CCPD board, on the agendas to start immediately following the other meeting, which allowed you to move into one meeting without having to wait for a posted time. So there were some concerns, especially with the CCPD meeting, with it being last, trying to figure out when a resident may want to attend. So your options really are going back to very specific start times, which means you may have breaks in between your meetings, or continuing the same type of posting we've been doing. What we did was we just moved the CCPD meeting immediately following the city council meeting, since that was the one that the bulk of the residents were really more interested in attending and knowing when to show up. A lot of times people would ask me, what time do I think the meeting will start? And it's difficult to give a time because it really varies on how long the previous or the earlier meetings take. So that was our solution to that concern.
Thank you, because I'm not going to advocate to putting times where we're split up because we're all so busy. But I think it is great if we can do the CCPD meeting immediately following the council meeting. And I believe these meetings are on the Tuesdays. We start at 10 a.m.
Correct.
Correct. And so to our residents who wants to participate in the CCPD meetings, you are able to come to the city council meeting at 10 o'clock. Because this council also approved free parking if you register with the city secretary, is that correct? Or the city manager's office?
You can get free parking through the city manager's office.
Right.
They have parking validation tickets.
Right, so that will take care of saying, I don't know how long I gotta pay for parking. And so I think this is a great move forward. We have that, but I will not advocate for setting a set time. So thank you for this IR.
You're welcome.
All right, our next informal report is on project management services at Will Rogers and the Will Rogers Complex, and William Johnson is available if there are any questions.
I would like William to just describe this for those listening, and special thanks to Matt Carter and Brad Barnes for being here as well.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. This IR is to advise you of some discussions that we've been having with Event Facilities Fort Worth, which is a nonprofit arm of the Fort Worth Stock Show and Rodeo that has really contributed over a number of years towards the economic viability of the Will Rogers complex. Historically, as major projects have come up, in the past, we've allowed or had them involved in managing major projects. Right now, I think a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the sheep and swine barn. But as you know, there are additional improvements that we're planning to do at Will Rogers. And it just made sense to start looking at whether or not they could also assist us in managing projects at the Will Rogers. They are probably more than anyone involved directly with the public, getting feedback on issues out at Will Rogers. As you know, we're continuing to do evaluations of that facility, and we thought that this was an opportunity to be more efficient and effective in implementing a lot of the improvements that need to be done at the Will Rogers. So this is a continuation of a partnership. We're talking to them about these projects and other projects that we may be having that may be coming up in the future out at Will Rogers.
Thank you, William. Any questions, Leonard? Go ahead.
Yeah, could you just talk, William, about the timing of the implementation and what we can anticipate?
Yes, we have, as you know, we had already started a process of evaluating potential contractors and consultants for some initial improvements to the concourse area, the restrooms out at the Will Rogers complex. And at the same time, we recently approved a contract that would, to allow them to go ahead and procure an architect to design the improvements to the sheep and swine barn. So those projects are already moving. What this would allow us to do would be to allow them to participate in helping to manage some of the improvements that council has already approved, as well as the timing on additional major improvements that'll be coming up once we issue debt for, I think, about a $42 million improvement of the Will Rogers complex.
And on that note, are there further funds that you can speak to that we're going to be putting to work? And what is the magnitude of those funds?
Yeah, in total, as of today, we know of and are in the process of having council approve about $100 million in improvements at Will Rogers. And that's based on a 2019 assessment of the improvements needed at the Will Rogers complex. We're updating that assessment now, and I think it's maybe another year or so before we'll have updated numbers on any additional improvements that are going to have to take place. But we have a plan in place, and we're working with finance and our financial advisors on how we intend to fund those improvements this year.
And with this, call it a reorg of sorts, you mentioned that it'll make things more efficient. Do you think it will accelerate the timing of the work that can be done?
That's historically been the case. There will be a laser focus from this group, and more importantly, it's not as simple as just going out and doing the work. There's ongoing activities at the Will Rogers. And so we have to work around a lot of the shows and the tenants and the bookings that have been done there. Needless to say, we anticipate that immediately after the stock show ends next year, you might see a lot of construction activity taking place because we'll be trying to get as much done as we can before the huge crowds are coming back to enjoy the stock show there.
Okay, thank you.
A few additional questions, William. So the $100 million in improvements that's been dedicated, capital improvements for Will Rogers, based on this IR, and I know you're working on additional agreement, you feel like events facilities can start us now on those improvements with those projects, correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
And do you anticipate, sounds like right now we're working on timing to work on the concourse and restrooms. That's today. We're not waiting till after the next stock show rodeo, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Any other important projects that you might want to articulate for the public and those that might be watching that I know there's a lot of attention around the improvements to Will Rogers?
Right. So the entire facility is under review. As I mentioned, in 2019, there was an assessment where an additional, I think we have, about 22 million that has been approved already for improvements. There's an additional 42 million in improvements based on the 2019 study that we're ready to start the process of performing those improvements, and we'll be coming back to council for approval to fund those later this summer. In addition, there's the sheep and swine barn improvements. That's a $40 million investment. So major investments and more to come as we continue to evaluate the need to upgrade the standards there. We want the Will Rogers facility to really represent the city of Fort Worth. We want it to be a place that we can all be proud of. I think this is the 85th year, so we're coming up on 100 years of operation there, and this is one of the crown jewels of the city. We want to make sure that we're being representative.
Thank you, William. And again, thank you to Brad and Matt for attending today and for all the partnership with Events Facilities Fort Worth and for Stock Show and Rodeo. We appreciate it. Go ahead.
Yeah, just want to make a comment. I supported this. Will Rogers is a great asset, but I think we found with some of our other facilities here, Britt, the Coliseum, the Stockyards, Zoo, our public-private partnerships can get things done more quickly. Again, we've got some great city staff, but I think sometimes when we outsource this of sorts to people that know what they're doing and care about it and have a lot invested like we know Event Facilities Fort Worth does, it may be better. And I know there's some timing with the sheep and swine barns and everything, all the ongoing activities you talked about. So I think this is a pretty smart move on our part to partner with them and get these things done.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next informal report is on staffing of community centers and aquatic facilities, and Dave Lewis and Sonia Singleton are available if there are any questions.
I don't have any questions, but I just really appreciate y'all putting this together and making sure that we're forward-thinking this summer and we learn from our mistakes from last summer. We don't have to be perfect all the time, but we have to learn from it, so I really appreciate this. Thank you.
And the final informal report is on our street light program, and it's a status update, and Martin Phillips is available if there are any questions. All right, Mayor, that concludes my report.
Okay, council, next item is any questions regarding significant zoning cases or on the M&C log that's upcoming for next week. Okay, moving then to our first presentation, results of commercial development study and steps required to create a one-stop shop. And I think we're punting that. Is that correct?
We are.
Okay.
That'll come back at a later date.
Okay. Next one is briefing on the Fort Worth Lab, which was going to start off with David Cook and Mark McDaniel.
All right, I'll kick it off. Hold on.
Oh, he's taking his jacket off. David likes a good prop. Needs a good steam or iron, but otherwise we'll let it pass.
So we're going to talk about the Fort Worth Lab. and I get to kick it off. I've had a goal for a number of years that envisions a group of employees working at a corporate level that combines data analytics, budgeting, or how we allocate our scarce resources, and public policy analysis. All with the idea of answering the question for you, City Council, and our citizens and our community, how are we making Fort Worth a better place? In our organization, we have a large number of plans. We collect a lot of data. We have a large operating and capital budget, and we measure a lot of activities. I think there is magic, though, when you combine all of that and then have a bunch of curious people that ask public policy questions like, has the increase in spending in street lights and pavement markings made Fort Worth a safer place? And has traffic and pedestrian accidents gone down? Or we've added a number of civilian response positions in police to handle lower priority activity. How has that improved the availability of time for patrol officers? Or how can we improve the 911 system from the time the caller calls us to the time the response is by their side? And it is also about looking into the future, like how will artificial intelligence, drones, robotics affect service delivery and how we deliver services in the city of Fort Worth? In the past, we've had a department, it was been named Budget Management, Budget and Research, Performance and Budget, and most recently, Planning and Data Analytics. I asked Mark McDaniel to look at where we are, look at where we need to be, and then tell us how we're going to get there. So we're making the recommendation of, and we're calling it Fort Worth Lab, and Mark's going to describe what that means. I think it's a great visual, though, right? It is about exploration. It's about learning. It's about analysis. It's about cause and effect. And most importantly, it's about making Fort Worth a better place. Not only today, but tomorrow, next week, next year, next decade, and the generation that follows. So this is our idea of how do we take all of what we already produce, which is plans, data, measurements, and turn it into useful information for you, our city council, and our community. Mark, Dr. Mark, take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Cook. So good afternoon, Mayor and Council. It's a pleasure to be in front of you after 3 months being here and talking to a lot of folks here on the ground in Fort Worth, and also talking to a lot of my colleagues around the nation that are part of my network in my previous life, and a lot of the different associations that have also helped to contribute to this, and you'll see that as we proceed through the slides.
Mark, apologies to interrupt you, but I'd like for you to introduce for those watching and those maybe that know who you are and your background and why you're so critical for this role and how
thank you,
David
Mayor.
somehow suckered you into it.
Thank you, Mayor. So Mark McDaniel, been in city management for 35 years, managed cities 8,000 population up to 1.3 million with Dallas. And then I got the opportunity to come here to Fort Worth after speaking with David when I was recruiting to fill this position that I'm filling right now on an interim basis. And so my career has been built mostly on city management, but also with an emphasis on performance improvement and budgeting and fiscal analysis.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we always like to tie back to our vision and mission whenever we begin a new journey. And our vision, as you can see here, does mention that we'll be the most livable and best managed city in the country. And so Fort Worth Lab definitely has that vision in mind. Then when we look at our mission, it's also about working together to build a strong community. And the way we have structured and formatted the Fort Worth Lab is definitely what makes it different perhaps than other efforts, and a lot of collaboration, particularly among all departments and all staff. We always like to also remind ourselves as staff, as we begin a new effort, about the strategic vision priorities that you all established here recently, as you see on the slide here, all three of them supporting the quality of life. So what's next, as we've talked about, it's the Fort Worth Lab. And so it's building municipal systems, capabilities to explore, analyze, and learn from data. And the why is really important to talk about as well. So why would we do this? I think Mr. Cook really articulated it well, but it's also enhanced and meaningful public engagement. That's the fuel for this to make it work. Collaboration among departments, as I mentioned just a moment ago, and also making sure that we have our eye on the ball in terms of the council's strategic vision priorities. And then better tools to develop and use data analytics. So you'll see in a moment where we're bringing in some resources to do that. And then looking at our performance trends so that we can begin to what we call bend the curve in a favorable direction as we see trends develop over time. Also enhance transparency and accountability so that we own the work that we're doing, and then just better informed consideration for both long and short-term decisions. So making that happen, as has been mentioned, the planning and data analytics will be transformed to become the Fort Worth Lab through the realignment, collaboration of people, tools, and systems. Before I go into the driver, which is really the public engagement and hearing from the council and other stakeholders, I want to talk a little bit about leadership, which will make sure that this is sustainable over time. So the whole effort reports up through to the city manager, and we want to introduce a corporate advisory board. So if you think about Fort Worth being really a multi-billion-dollar corporation with several thousand employees, I think we can learn some things from the private sector, which I have done in a prior life, for them to advise us on best practices in the private sector and how we can apply those in the public sector. Now, we know that government can't necessarily be run like a business, but we do know that we can borrow best practices from the private sector and use them, and you'll see some of those in a moment. So the idea here is that Mr. Cook would appoint C-suite executives from some of the largest employers in Fort Worth to serve on this board. They'd meet at least twice a year to hear about what we're doing and make suggestions about how we might further improve the way that we're run as an organization. The other really critical piece here is the Staff Leadership Steering Committee. We'll be meeting once a month, and we'll be talking about the deployment of these strategies, the pace that we're proceeding at, and just all the strategies involved to make sure that it's going to work. And also so that they own it and they have a stake in it. Then the Chief Transformation Officer will report up and run the lab on a day-to-day basis. So you don't see this title a lot in public sector. You will see it in private sector. And we're pleased to introduce it here to really be accountable for making sure all of this works. So on the left-hand side, this is really the fuel that drives the engine, is all that feedback mechanism, whether it's the council telling us what your key priorities are and those driving budget decisions and the way we do business on business planning, or it's the community with our traditional surveys, which we still do, and we're about to launch another one here in a while. Or the traditional town hall meetings, right? Those are still a part of this. Now, if you think about budget, comprehensive planning, the bond program, those are all public engagement efforts. We want to make sure that those dovetail and that they're working together and that we are kind of cross-pollinating information for those efforts and doing it all out of the lab. And so we'll also be using a lot more robust platforms, software platforms to get feedback from people that perhaps we don't hear from all the time, and that will then complement the citizen surveys. So I'm going to start going into each of these components. First of all, we start with strategic foresight and future threats. So this is working with an outside firm with the Alliance for Innovation. Fort Worth is actually a member of this organization, so we already get some of their studies, and this is looking out, as the city manager mentioned, 30, 50 years from now. What does service look like, not just in the U.S., but around the world, and how service delivery could be provided for in the future? And then talking to a lot of stakeholders, maybe inside the organization, even outside the organization here in Fort Worth, and really discussing what if we could do this, and how would that work, and what sort of technology is out there now. So it's a group of futurists that can look at a variety of topics, and we're toying with what that first one might be. I would envision doing about 2 of these a year. And so we've looked at a number of service areas that we might want to really hone in on. And so, we do a lot of studies now, like the Matrix studies and the Gateway study, or Citygate studies. But that's really about the here and now. It's not about what does that service delivery look like 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, and how can we position ourselves now to be able to really take advantage of those new technologies, whether that's artificial intelligence or just a new way of doing things. The next piece is data analytics. We do this in the organization. Some of our better departments at this I would say, are probably police and perhaps transportation and public works. Experimenting with a lot of tools. So we're contracting with a firm called Delivery Associates. This is a firm actually out of the UK, but they have a lot of presence in the US. And so they provide us tools, and then they train us how to use those tools, and it's kind of like teaching us how to fish, right? So after they're gone, then we can still use those tools. And what we anticipate here is a multi-phased program where we're taking a few departments a year and walking them through the use of these tools, helping to train them in the use of these tools, and then you'll see that next with priority-based budgeting as well. So the first 3 departments that we're focusing on are police, transportation and public works, and we want to use an internal service, so we're going to use human resources to help them to analyze the data and use these new tools in different ways that we've never used before. It'll also really start looking at things like predictive analytics, and Transportation and Public Works is already experimenting with some of this now about where they need to focus their maintenance dollars or where they may anticipate street lights going out, that sort of thing. The next piece is priority-based budgeting, and this is moving away from that traditional line item approach where we're really talking about putting things in front of the council, decision packages that are about, does this meet your priority, and to what degree does it meet your priority? So we can rank each of those decision packages in that way. So when we ask the departments to submit their budget, they're doing them in alignment with these priorities. And so we'll have a firm, Resource X, help us with that, again, teaching us how to do it so that we don't have to have them on board all the time. They're kind of a lab partner, so to speak, for now. And so they'll help us prioritize and allocate, mapping those costs back to the strategic priorities. So the listening sessions that we had with all of you to interpret for us what the priorities meant, that information will then go into this, help us to prioritize each of these in that way. The next piece is what we already do in terms of comprehensive planning. And we're, as you all are very well aware, we're about to launch on a very public effort. We haven't done that in about 20 years as far as the extent to which we want to engage the public in developing the next comprehensive plan. That RFP is already out on the street, and we will ask the council to select a service provider midsummer, and then work will likely begin in the fall. So this is what Eric and his team has traditionally done, but we're going to go beyond that in this next block. So we want to take on the coordination of the bond program, still, in orchestration with William and his group, and Dana and her group, and others on helping to develop that and provide all the input that they normally do. But then we also want to develop a strategic investment plan. So it's taking all the plans that we have today, not just the comprehensive plan, but also area development plans, the village plans, TIF plans, PID plans, water and sewer plans, layering all that together, and then making recommendations around where do we get the most bang for our buck, and be strategic about the investment of our infrastructure. So Eric and his group, along with the budget team, will be doing that, and I'm so excited about this because we're finally marrying the comprehensive planning function with the budgeting function, particularly on the capital side. We're also going to be, and I think you're aware of this because it was an IR earlier, look at using some tools for fiscal analysis around land use decisions. So when you have a zoning case or land use change, you have some idea about fiscal impacts, and so we're looking at providing that information as well out of Eric's group. This next piece is strategic planning at the department level. We'll call it Fort Worth STAT. This is a program that you'll find in the nation's largest, some nation's largest cities, where it's a really kind of a quick review of every department in the city at least twice a year when there's not, you're not fighting a fire in some emergency and it's not the budget process, so you can really focus on what's happening. And this is where you'll have their SWOT analysis, their goals that align back up to the council's strategic priorities. You'll also have actions to achieve those goals and what's the dollar amount that might be associated with that, so that when we're putting the budget together, we already know about what the departments might be bringing to us because we've talked about it in these Fort Worth STAT meetings, or we call them turn the curve or bend the curve meetings. And there'll be statistics in there that we'll be able to monitor over time and look at those trends. And so the new lab will help the departments to develop these strategic plans, or the Fort Worth STAT plans. The next piece is sunrise reviews. This is a kind of a knockoff, if you will, on sunset reviews. I've done sunset reviews in a prior life. They're negative. You never really eliminate whole programs. You just really evaluate them and see what can work, you could do better. And so we're calling them sunrise reviews because it's about new beginnings and looking at the way we do business and how can we do it differently to make it even better. And so we'll identify opportunities for these, maybe 2, 3 a year that we'll conduct through the Fort Worth STAT meetings and also through the data analytics. And other ways of getting this information up through either the leadership or from employees making suggestions even. The next piece is Lean Six Sigma and the parallel organization. Fort Worth has a history of the use of Lean Six Sigma. I know that we've all heard the staff stand up here and talk about whether it's in Lauren's group or another group, Development Services, how they're using Lean Six Sigma to improve processes with the employees who are closest to the issues, understanding them better, conducting the analysis. And so this is really taking it to a whole nother level and deploying it in a whole different way and supporting those efforts that are already happening today, but going beyond that and it really enhancing that program across the organization. So let's just say, for example, we take 2 cohorts through the process. Maybe there's 10 to 15 that are in that process per year. We teach them how to do Lean Six Sigma, but they start their training with a project. It's not they go through all their training and, okay, now you have a project. They start with the project from the very beginning, so they're starting to make an impact from the very beginning with their project. Once you get to kind of a critical mass with the number of employees that have gone through this program, the mindset on looking at ways things are done really changes. They start looking at it in different ways and say, well, what if we did this? And why do we still do it this way? And so it really begins to take on a life of its own and move the organization. Not just the leadership pulling the organization from the top, but people from the middle of the organization or even the bottom pushing it up and forward and all in the same direction. And that's what I mean when I talk about that parallel organization, where you've got this group of people that are really developing some energy in the organization to move all in that same direction. And the last piece is a first in the nation. We're working with the Government Finance Officers Association of America to deploy a fellowship program around rethinking budgeting. And so their initiative on budgeting is really, it's the two differences major differences are, number one, over the top public engagement so that you really understand what your citizens want. And number two would be the whole idea of priority-based budgeting, so that it's not just that line item budgeting. It's really about funding those things that are most important to you as a community. And so we'll bring in some fellows each year. GFOA will provide a curriculum. And these will be a one-year fellow, and hopefully some of these individuals will come on full-time with us, not just in the lab, but every department's got budget staff. And so this would be a great pipeline for some real talent and some energy around that in the organization. So here's the implementation. We're already bringing on strategic partners to help us with this that I mentioned earlier, whether that's Delivery Associates or Alliance for Innovation or ResourceX. This position that I'm holding now, I'll start recruiting for my replacement that'll fill the position full-time in May. And then we're realigning our staff to make sure that we are able to pull this off. And then we'll phase in each of these components over time. And then here's, again, a timeline in terms of what I just described, and we're going to layer in the proposed budget process. So with that, Mayor and Council, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mark. Council whatever I'm trying to say. Questions from council, there you go. Jared.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I have two questions. One's kind of off the cuff, but for as long as you're here, are you going to wear that white coat moving forward?
Yeah, we're going to get the not logo, but the brand on it. We'll wear these up in the shop. Yeah.
And can you provide it to all of us, council?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah.
The second question is, I really appreciate your vision and really love the direction. Thank you, David, as well. What happens next for you after the July-August timeline of a CTO being onboarded?
I'll answer that. So he wants to post the position. I have to approve posting the position.
Right, that's what I'm trying to figure out.
Carlos.
Thanks for the presentation, Mark. So generally speaking, I get it. You know, you're going to have a descriptive, a prescriptive, predictive, and diagnostic approach to this, right? That all sounds great. You know, I like it. I guess going forward, you mentioned the three departments that you're going to start with, police, TPW, and HR. You know, I can guess maybe at least on some starting points what they're going to look at. Going forward, I'd like to get some information on how much input these three third-party entities are going to have when it comes to staffing, right? If they're going to offer us modeling capabilities that can tell us, you know, where we went wrong in the past, what is going on in the present, and what we should look like in the future. I just kind of want to know the balance, right? I mean, my expectation is the city, you know, that authority resides first with the city manager. So kind of want to get some detail later on, you know, on how all that's going to play out.
Yeah, very, very good point. It's top of mind. And that's why the steering committee is so important, meeting on this as far as strategy. And then also in talking with David and his team about the resources that it's going to take to do this, to make sure that we're properly resourced.
Okay, thank you.
Gina.
Thank you. Very impressive presentation here. I've got a question for you. Now, I don't keep up with a lot of them, but I know that we've got at least one company in Fort Worth that's won the Malcolm Baldrige, that being Friesen Nichols. They're the first to win it in their category nationwide back in 2012. I would imagine that companies like that you would want to partner with because Friesen Nichols continues to spread the gospel, of performance. Now, we hired a Six Sigma black belt here years ago, David. That's why I looked at you. I got real excited then she was gone. I don't know what didn't connect there, but do we have a list or roster of who we have who's already trained Six Sigma, green belt, black belt? Do you know?
We do not have the list, Mayor Pro Tem, but we're going to start developing that list because that's going to be critical as we talk about deployment. You know, who are the folks that are already very familiar with this?
Well, I'm kind of lackluster because I've been to this party before. David knows I was real excited, and then that chick was gone. I don't know where she went. But some things that come to mind for me are, aviation in terms of who you're pulling from, David. When I think of aviation, I think of DFW, now second busiest North America. I think, of course, of BNSF Railroad. I don't know how you pull in the local providers. When it comes to healthcare, I'm thinking about THR, JPS. We got our level 1 trauma center there. Jones Lang LaSalle, who's coming here. And so I'd like to make sure that you keep this entire council in the loop of this because there may be resources we all have that we can help with this. But, for sure, I would expect Friesen Nichols to have a seat at this table, and they would love to be there.
Yeah, Bob Herchert's one of my mentors, and Cindy Mulroney was actually on my advisory board when I was in Dallas, so right on.
Cindy did my strategic plan for me at my real job
Awesome.
after they won it.
Awesome.
Any other questions from council? Leonard, go ahead.
Yeah, just maybe a couple comments, David. One, thank you for your vision in thinking about this as a strategic move for the city. I think we're going to be better for it. And Mark, thank you for the presentation. It's super thoughtful and very in-depth. So very well done. Thank you. I guess my one question is about work product. So what can council expect on what kind of timeline in terms of how to see what the work that you all are doing and implementing, and in what form will that come?
So for phase one, we hope to begin launching that, we will, before this fiscal year ends. And so that's not just setting the shop up, but also launching the priority-based budgeting with fiscal year '24. That's going to be a little challenging because we are short-staffed right now, but we in talking with our partners, we think we can pull that off. And also introducing the data analytics for those 3 departments that I just mentioned. And so you'll begin to see some of the tools that they're using probably 6 months to 9 months in fiscal year '24, because we'll be mapping on the priority-based budgeting leading up to fiscal year '24, and then we'll be training also during that time on the data analytics. And so then they'll be able to use those in the following fiscal year. I'll be submitting a budget request to enhance our staffing levels, not dramatically, but enough to do this properly. And so those folks will come on in fiscal year '24. I anticipate we'll do probably 4 or 5 more departments in the next fiscal year, and then keep that going and develop a full year plan for deployment. So all 30 or 26 departments, however many there are already programmed about when you're going. It's not a matter of if you're going, it's when. And so everybody can know and prepare, but then also the way we're doing this in a phased way helps us to teach a few departments to do it well, and then everybody gets to see how it's working, and we also get to see some of the issues that we might be facing in the process, and then improve it on the next phase. So again, ergo, the reason for the phased approach.
And in your work or your experience previously, the program that you have designed here and outlined, do you all work with audit in any way to coordinate, the efforts, their efforts, along with what you're seeing in terms of better practices?
Yes, in my prior life, we did. That the auditor actually had a seat at the table and on the steering committee, so we were aware of what he and his shop were doing and vice versa. And David and I have talked about that and how we might make sure that there's some knowledge about what each is doing and how we can share, collaborate, I guess. Back to your question about what you can expect, the Fort Worth stat implementation really needs to replace our narrative side of the budget, where they report their KPIs and their goals and their objectives. That's going to be replaced with Fort Worth stat, so that they're working on it a full year. It just rolls right into seamlessly to the budget process, and you're looking at those trends over time. So we want to deploy that hopefully before the end of this fiscal year, maybe beginning of next fiscal year. The Strategic Foresight Initiative, we want to launch that even this fiscal year. So you'll start seeing some of this now, and then a lot next year.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from council? No. Very exciting. Thank you very much,
Thank
Mark
you.
and David. Thank you. Our last presentation is intergovernmental strategies. I think Renee Tellis is going to kick things off with Carlo Capua. Just as a reference for council, we're not going to do the overview of credit rating agency meetings. We've got one we're outstanding on, so.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Carlo Capua, Chief of Strategy and Innovation.
And as you can see, in keeping with the city manager's theme and Mark McDaniel, Carlo and I dressed up as intergovernmental municipal workers today.
That's right. Thank you, Doctor. So in our roles, Renee and I, we really focus on the synthesis of people and information to make sure that we're all working toward the well-being for the city of Fort Worth and its residents and visitors. And so we were talking yesterday about intergovernmental strategy or approach is probably best synthesized by, if you've ever been to Africa, you probably heard this proverb. If you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. And so we plan on going very far together. We've been working about the past 6 months with City Manager Cook for three things. Number one, to make sure that our efforts are aligned with all of our partners. Number two, to make sure that the city of Fort Worth is at the table on a local, county, state, and national level. And number three, that we're thinking intentionally to make sure that we serve every diaspora group and manage growth here in the city. So we'll just give you a brief update. And here's the flow is we will, we'll go through the why, the key players, and then the proposed concept. So you may remember by now, you're probably very familiar with this slide, that you've seen probably ad nauseum a few months ago. This was your strategic vision priority. And when you look at intergovernmental strategy, a thoughtful approach will focus on those three at the bottom: community investment, community safety, and growth, all of which impacts, as you can see, the quality of life. And so we also saw, you may be familiar with the city manager work plan, Mr. Cook. In section 5C, he specifically calls out intergovernmental with a Veterans Affairs liaison. And any good intergovernmental strategy would touch on these three city values, talking about respect, customer experience, and continuous improvement. And so we're here today to share how your city values, your city council priorities, the city manager work plan, and these organizational values all come together to meet that need.
And in part of assessing that need is really working off the premise and the acknowledgement that we can and should be doing more in this area. And so we want to be able to have this function that we are proposing here at the end, be able to take from the city perspective to working with our team members from the macro to the micro and the micro to the macro. So that both entities can be able to receive a benefit, whether it's a project or just the organization as a whole. So when we were looking at when we were assessing the organizations we could better be involved with and or improve our relationships with, we thought it would be best in our mind if we place them into these three buckets. And you'll see those played out as we move through the slides. But just a kind of question maybe for the table or our viewing audience, surprised us. When you think about how many municipal entities or city-like organizations do you think actually touch the city of Fort Worth boundaries or Fort Worth surrounds them? Go ahead. 31 that we actually touch, and then counties that we actually touch are 7 of those. And so the objective, again, is for us to be able to break down the silos and actively build relationships with these entities. Now, our history of collaboration has maybe not been necessarily the best or what it could have been. And so we realized that as we begin this process, that there may be some skeptics that may question our authenticity as we move forward. And so really, the low-hanging fruit as we look at these adjacent government entities will be for the city manager and his leadership team to make one-on-one meetings with the leadership administration for each of these entities and go to these organizations kind of on a listening tour and begin asking them on their space, on their turf, and on their time, what it is, their issues and challenges they are facing, so that we can know how we can either better support or complement what they're doing. And it's not so that we are going to come in as the big dog and tell others what to do. And then as we look into our regional committees, this is just the first slide of 2 slides. And we realize that some electeds and some employees have been attending these or have a seat at the table. For other situations, maybe not so much. But we want to be able to take full advantage of the seat we are provided. We can go on to the next slide, so that we can guarantee that the perspective of the city manager's leadership team and the council's goals are being carried through to these tables and then being brought back to the CMO team as we make long-term plans for the city, very much tied into kind of what you're hearing about the Fort Worth Lab and ensuring that we can all be rowing as best in the same direction as possible. And then, next, as we establish the common need to realize our collective power, we have the COGS committees and subcommittees that are going to help us realize that vision as well. So quite a big chunk of organizations and entities that we've, on this initial assessment, looked at that we need to be working with. So in actualizing that from an administrative standpoint, these are the components that we know we most need to fill in relation to personnel time and serve in different roles. Many of these individuals already working in roles that they see, but this includes, of course, the Veterans Affairs that we've been talking about, the regional committees that you saw the logos for, the touching base with the other governmental entity municipalities, and then the educational component as well. And a special thanks to Diana Giordano for helping us look at what a Veterans Affairs position looks like across other municipalities, what the pay is and what the job description is.
And thanks also to the city secretary office. I called COG, just, the whole list of committees, and they even admitted we have like a gazillion committees, they said. So having one person really own this and making sure that we have a seat at every table and that what's being talked about in one organization and another organization are maybe synthesized. For example, let's say that a school district in Fort Worth, we're having a $1 billion bond. Well, how does that affect our roads and our traffic and our safety and maybe our open space and our parks? I think having those intentional collisions between departments and key stakeholders would be really important. And so working out the details of how, and many additions to these team, we'll work with our current staff members, will really help complete the team, and that's something that we're continuing to talk about. But we welcome your comments and feedback and questions.
Thank you. Elizabeth and Alan?
Sure, thanks. This has been a bee in my bonnet, which is why we're having this presentation today, so thank you so much. And I want to be clear on the reason why I think that this is very important, and I open the floor up to my colleagues. We do sit, those of us that sit on the Regional Transportation Committee or the Trinity Metro or various boards, I think we try to do a sufficient job of making sure that we are relaying that information to staff when appropriate as it comes through. But we sometimes aren't maybe the best conduits for that. We have the base, and that's a huge entity. We have TCU, Texas Wesleyan, right? We have all of these major institutions working within our city. And I sometimes feel like I'll see something on the news that maybe the base is doing or Texas Wesleyan or, whoever it is. And I think, well, that would have been great to know about. And I think that enhanced communication, one, keeps us more informed. It helps us support our partners, those major players in the city, in a more comprehensive way. And I think by doing that, we support our residents in a more comprehensive way too, right? If we start with the big ones, and then we can move to those smaller entities. We are very lucky in this, and what I don't see up here, and I'd be open to discussion, we are really, really lucky in this community that we have a lot of great philanthropic organizations that do some amazing work in the education space, but also outside of the education space. And to the extent that one of those roles is trying to make sure that we're working with those organizations as well, particularly, the larger ones. Obviously, we can't work with all of them. But really focusing on getting the information from those entities and being able to push them out to our residents. For example, if there's a major training operation on the base that's going to have increased traffic, air traffic, or, something that would cause alarm to residents, Michael being able to send an email out saying, don't be alarmed when you see this. It's not Jade Helm, right? We'll be good to go. And so it's those types of things that I really would like us to improve on in this. And so I appreciate y'all putting this together. And I've got lots more suggestions, but we'll take those offline.
Thank you.
Alan? And Gina.
So, Carlo, Renee, thank you so much for bringing this together and bringing it to us today. At the very end of the discussion, you mentioned, Carlo, and the slide kind of covers what I was going to ask the question about, and that's the school districts. We have a number of school districts, and right now, between the north side of Fort Worth, the far north of Fort Worth, and the south side, we have about $3.4 billion worth of bonds that they're issuing that's going to be construction. And so I think it's really important that we consider our interactions with the school districts to really stay on top of that, both from traffic, from safety, and just educational assistance that we can do. So I'm glad to see that come through at the end. Thank you.
Thank you.
I was just going to pick up on that. Crowley, for example, is going to build 8 new schools, which means they have to find 8 new sites. We ought to be part of the site acquisition group just because we're going to be impacted by roads, sidewalks, and other things. So it's improving the coordination of all that.
And we do have that with Eagle Mountain Saginaw ISD. You know, you remember that they even provided us with their comprehensive plan. And I think a lot of staff members have that. So, I mean, that's in that same direction. We should continue to coordinate with the others.
Mayor Pro Tem Bivens.
Yeah, I was just going to piggyback. David, I noticed that you and the team met with Crowley ISD, and I was really excited to see that. And this is a testament to the work that y'all are already beginning. So I think you're absolutely right. That coordination is necessary.
Gina.
Since this is the silly season of politics, I'm going to make sure you all know my role in this. I had a conversation with Carlos 6 months after you came on board and explained to him that I saw him potentially leaving or getting bored if he didn't have something more comprehensive. And I knew that because I heard his conversations through the walls. And he would be...
I knew I should have wore that headset.
He'd be dealing with potholes, loose dogs, all the things that, you know, I saw him bigger than, and the idea of intergovernmental relations is what I talked to you about. Now, I'm going to echo what Alan said. In that vision included relationships with these school districts that we touch. But I will caution you guys, if you'll go back to the COG page or slide that you have, I'll caution you that the committee that Elizabeth mentioned, the council members who serve on that committee are very territorial. I expect staff to be in the traditional supportive role, which is what they serve right now. I serve as vice chair. Mike is on that committee. Alan is on that committee, as is Elizabeth. We need to continue having that support from TPW that we get. I can promise you, Kelly looks at every agenda before I sit at that chair. And if I'm back here in a few weeks or so, I'll be chair. And I assure you, I need staff to be supportive. So don't get out in front of council. That happens too often.
Yes, ma'am.
I will also commend you on the structure that you have. But we also need to take a look at what are we doing with TML, NLC, ICMA. There are so many opportunities, but in spite of this great presentation that you've given us today, David, I am still concerned about the weakness of our communicating through traditional forms of communication to the public. And so we can continue building up other things, but until we get a very strong community engagement program that talks to John Q. Public about when we meet, what's on the agenda, where is City Hall, then we still have that weak link. And so I thought we were going to be getting that addressed with the change that we have now, but I need to see a traditional public information office. And until we get that, the bigger we get, we'll have more frustrated citizens because we're not communicating what they expect from us. So that's just my concern, and it pains me, and maybe I'm just kind of stuck on that because I used to serve in that role, and I know how that role functions. But we do not communicate things to the average citizenry as we should and as we're expected to. So I would like to see us work toward that, and I will help with that.
Thanks, Gina.
Good presentation. Don't be confused. It's a great presentation.
Thank you.
Since it's been brought up a couple times, actually go back to the COG. It actually, the regional coordinating committee that she was talking about that deals with the base, that makes sure it's continues to thrive and survive, isn't actually not on that list. So that's another one that should be added. It's part of that.
Anyone else on council? No. Thank you very much for the presentation. We
Thank you all
look
for your
forward to more
comments.
work. Okay. Council, that's the last of our presentations. Any future agenda items? I'm going to alert City Manager Cook too.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead, Chris.
Let me find it. I do. And I have met with the people who are working to bring in our new police monitor. Some of the community is asking what is the public engagement looks like for the new police monitor hire. So if we can put some information out there, what that public engagement is gonna look like. I think most of them were pretty pleased with the last time Kim was hired with the public engagement, but wanna know how this one is gonna look. All right, that's all I have.
Anyone else? Leonard, go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to request an IR to explain why the concert at the Panther Island Pavilion Sunday night, and this was 2 Sundays ago, April 23rd, was allowed to happen so close to neighborhoods. We received, I can't even tell you how many
Yeah.
calls and emails, complaints from residents on the west side, those neighborhoods who were trying to get their children to bed on Sunday night.
Heck, I was trying to go to
School
bed, Leonard. It wasn't the kids.
Well, we heard it as well.
Yeah.
And so, windows were rattling, and again, there were just a ton of complaints. So, specifically, I'd like to know if proper permits were approved for this event. Did the concert go above approved noise decibels? Why would such a concert be allowed so close to neighborhoods? What was that a consideration? Why was this concert allowed to go on until midnight? And is there a way to prevent this from happening again in the future?
Jared?
I have 2 items. One is related to earlier conversation on traffic enforcement section, David. I don't know if it's a budget response or whatnot. It doesn't necessarily have to be IR, but I would like for us to have a discussion about what our chief staffing needs with respect to the traffic enforcement division to adequately enforce traffic on our arterials. The second thing,
Jared, you might want to add authorized strength to that.
Yep. Well received. The second thing is I'd like a IR to better understand our street maintenance schedules for neighborhoods. We have some older neighborhoods that are in need of some fairly intensive street work, and so just want to better understand what that looks like ahead of our discussions on PAYGO and the upcoming budget, and some of it may even need to be in the next bond, so just want to better understand that program before having those discussions.
Michael?
I have 2. One, in our ongoing work with the Small Business Task Force, I'll credit Carlo for sending the article around showing that Fort Worth is the 9th best place to open a business. They had categories: business environment, access to resources, and business costs. It seemed we were pretty non-competitive in business costs to open a business. So I'd like an RR just looking at our cost to open a business here and as compared to other like-sized cities. And then a second IR, as we just talked about the Ubby Dubby Festival. I know, Leonard, you appreciated down on Panther Island, and getting into the fireworks season. I know that we follow our fire code and our National Fire Protection Association dealing with the rules about when we actually permit large commercial firework displays. But I'm wondering what our noise ordinance and setbacks from neighborhoods say with those big commercial. I have had some inquiries into fireworks within neighborhood settings that are authorized and we permit, but it may not actually be the safest thing. So, thank you.
Any other items, council? Okay, with that, meeting adjourned.